Good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome Belgian multimedia artist and director Johan Grimonprez, who will hold a masterclass titled All Memory is Theft, Everyday Words Disappear, in which he will present his guidelines for reclaiming storytelling and belonging. Grimonprez is known for his films, which mix fiction and documentary, for a collage-like archival approach, and weave new narratives, pathways, and stories, emphasizing a multiplicity of realities. His practice examines themes such as propaganda, the role of mass media, global power dynamics, and the nature of storytelling, questioning the reliability of history and the ways narratives are constructed in the digital and television age. Overall, his work forms an acute and indispensable criticism of contemporary media manipulation and mainstream's consensus about history. This masterclass will be followed by, at 6 p.m. by a screening of his powerful experimental documentary about the history of plane hijackings, Dial History from 1997. And two short video works will also be screened in the same slot, Two Travelers to the River, which is inspired by the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish, and Everyday Words Disappear, which juxtaposes political philosopher Michael Hart's musics on the politics of love with footage from Godard's dystopian classic Alphaville. Tomorrow we will also have a chance, the opportunity to watch soundtrack to KOI, and both of these screenings will be accompanied by Q&As with Johan, and also after the lecture there will be plenty of time for the audience, for you to give us your feedback and for ask questions, and we encourage you to do so. So, Johan, please join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dina, for the intro and inviting me. I have to say, you can always interrupt. If you want to reroute what I'm talking about, you're very much welcome to ask questions or object or give feedback. I thought of maybe digging into two themes. One is civil disobedience, and the other one more or less zooming in on my methodology to explain a bit how I construct. In that case, it will be Double Take, a film about Hitchcock double game. And I will here and there show excerpts of films that partially some of it will be seen tonight, and then tomorrow also the fragments of soundtrack. I'll start with an excerpt of Shadow World, a film that will not be screened, but you can actually watch it on my website actually. If you go to johangrimonprez.be, you go to the films, you can basically download all the films or watch all the films as well. So it's a bit of Creative Commons potluck. But I'd like to start with a fragment from Shadow World, and this is more specific. This is in the chapter of civil disobedience. That would be Mutazar al-Zaidi, which is featured in the film Shadow World. Shadow World is about analysis of the corruption in the global arms trade, which is basically a pleonasm, because there's no arms deal that actually doesn't have a component of corruption, in a sense. This is sort of the template of the film, that basically war has been privatized for a big part in the United States, because what is real and deal in the weapons trade is in comparison to the rest of the world, the United States is half of what the rest of the world is dealing and reading in weapons trade. And so not only is war privatized, but also it actually dictates what foreign policy is all about. But this is a section of a character from a journalist from Baghdad who actually reclaims the story of the invasion of Iraq. So let's jump to the clip.
أنا منتظر الزيدي، صحفي صغير، أحب بلدي وأكره الاحتلال كل أشكاله.
أنا بالشريط اللي سجلته كتبت عليه تصريحي، والظرف وضعته في خزانتي بمكان ما، وكتبت بوصيتي إذا قتلت بطريقة غير طبيعية أبحث عن شريط مكتوب فيه تصريحي. وكنت ناوي أخرج إلى المنزل، وعلى أثناء نزولي من السلم التقوا بي قالوا إنه هنالك مؤتمر صحفي كبير. قلت لهم من هو؟ قالوا جورج بوش. أنا مباشرة صعد الدم إلى رأسي لما قالوا جورج بوش. هو كان النتيجة الأولى لهذا العمل هو القتل.
Peace, that's what we want. Freedom and peace.
شوف، هو الإحياء هو للاستنكار، وله دلالة أنا وجدتها فيه. لأن جورج بوش لما دخل العراق دخل بكذبة، عدة كذبات، ولكن أحدى هذه الكذبات قال أن الشعب العراقي سيستقبلون بالورود. قالها كلمة في مؤتمر صحفي. تحولت هذه الكلمة بفضل الوسائل الإعلامية الأمريكية الداعمة للحرب على العراق والوسائل الإعلامية العربية الداعمة للحرب على العراق. تحولت هذه الجملة التي قالها جورج بوش: أنت لم ترى صورة للعراقي يستقبل الأمريكان بالورود، ولكنك سمعت بهذه أن العراقيين. لذلك أردت طريقة مساوية في القوة ومعاكسة في الاتجاه، أن العراقيين لم يستقبلوا الاحتلال وجورج بوش بالورود، بل ودعوه بالأحذية لكي يستيقظ العالم أمام هذه الجرائم. هو حذاء ينتعل ولكنه له فم.
So what if the guy threw a shoe at me?
كسروا أسناني الاثنان، كسروا قدمي. كان طبعا كهرباء وبالمي، غرقوني بالمي في درجة حرارة تحت الصفر، يمكن 5 أو 7. كانوا يغرقوني بالمي البارد صباحا، وتعذيب بالكابلات لدرجة أنه كان لون جسدي لون الموف الغامق.
I'm going to read you the sourcing of the LA Times report. Paragraph 1, US authorities say. Column 1 still, US officials said. Said one US Justice Department counterterrorism official. Column 2, officials said, US authorities say, US officials said, those officials said, the officials confirmed, American officials complained, they said, US officials stressed. Column 3, US authorities said, Jordanian officials said. We've got a slight... No laughter, please. We haven't finished yet. Several US officials said. Column 4, US officials said. Several American officials said. Officials say US officials, but US officials said. One US counterterrorism official said. I'm not joking. There it is. That is the journalism you're getting fed. And I sometimes think the LA Times and the New York Times should be called American officials say.
Okay, so what I think important about Muntazar al-Zaini's story is the fact that he reclaims the storytelling and the story that is being told in mainstream media, but that he's been able to counter with his own story by actually also interjecting into a press conference with his shoe, where he says the shoe got him out and the shoe retold the story of the lies in India. Same with Robert Fisk at the end, the journalist that you hear is actually reclaiming the story of the lies we're being fed. And so a lot of the films that, you know, that sort of embark on a story is a lot about sort of to try to dissect how can we counter the mainstream story and reclaim that storytelling. Let me show you another couple of examples. This is another Belgian part of the surrealist movement, the surrealist character in Belgium, who reclaims stories by way of flattening cakes. So this is the sort of how he interjected into the mainstream.
Police and security guards in Belgium were caught flat-footed today by a cowardly sneak attack on one of the world's wealthiest men. The target was Microsoft Chairman Bill Gates, arriving for a meeting with community leaders. Watch what happens when a team of hitmen meet him first with a pie in the face. Gates was momentarily and understandably shaken, but he was not injured. The hit squad piled on with 2 more pies before one of them was wrestled to the ground and arrested. The others for at least a moment got away. Gates went inside, wiped his face clean, and made no comment. He then went ahead with his scheduled meeting. No word on the motive for this attack.
So they called it attack. But the attacker himself, he calls himself a burlesque terrorist.
En tarton, les pompeux, cornichons.
Il se fait que pour entarter Bill Gates, pour la toute première fois depuis qu'on frappe, ça faisait donc beaucoup de gardes de corps. Mais notre grand secret à nous, c'est que nous sommes beaucoup. En l'occurrence, nous étions 32 avec 25 tartes, et ce qui fait qu'on a pu totalement déjouer l'attention des gardes de corps. C'est là que nous avons frappé. Au moment où Bill Gates est arrivé, toute sirène hurlante, les unités gloupinesques ont formé un unique tourbillon. Il est sorti de sa voiture et le tourbillon pâtissier s'est abattu tout droit sur lui en faisant des gloup. C'est un membre de l'état-major de Microsoft Belgique qui est arrivé à nous avec un plan d'action et des voies d'accès à la victime. Bien entendu, personne à Microsoft ne sait qui est le traître. Or, comme ils sont beaucoup dans l'état-major de Microsoft Belgique, la suspicion règne. On se demande, mais qui est le traître? Ça va totalement... Pas du tout parce qu'elles ont bobo, ça ne fait pas mal du tout une tarte, mais parce qu'elles se trouvent ridiculisées publiquement, leur image étant couverte de chantilly, elles ne peuvent pas le supporter. Voilà ce qui se passe. Mais nous sommes certes des terroristes, mais des terroristes burlesques. Et notre action est extrêmement violente, certes, mais c'est une violence purement symbolique. C'est la violence des cartoons à la Bugs Bunny. Et dans le cadre de ces sabotages systématiques, j'avais inventé Georges le Gloupier, entarteur de cinéaste.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? C'est pas méchant, c'est pas méchant.
Alors, arrêtez ça, s'il vous plaît. Lâchez-le et lève-toi maintenant.
C'est Gloupinès.
Lève-toi, mon bonhomme. Lève-toi vite. Lève-toi vite ou je t'écrase la gueule à tout à l'heure. Tu te lèves maintenant. Tu te lèves.
Nous avons une victime de prédilection, c'est la seule que nous entartons très régulièrement.
Gloup, gloup.
Il s'agit du philosophe Bernard-Henri Lévy, qui se prend pour Jean-Paul Sartre et qui personnifie pour nous le vide philosophique dans toute sa gélatineuse stupidité. Il est totalement nombrilesque, m'as-tu vu, colérique. Ce qui fait que c'est une victime de rêve. Comme nous vivons naturellement dans la société de l'apparence, dans une société où la nature profonde des êtres est occultée, qu'il n'y a pas de rapport direct entre la nature profonde des êtres et le comportement public qu'ils ont, cornichon, puisque les gens tout autour de nous s'accrochent dérisoirement à des images, aux images qu'ils donnent, à des images qu'ils donnent d'eux-mêmes, nous attaquons en plein dans leurs images.
Okay, so I'll go a little bit back in the history of my own films. The very first thing I did for Belgian television is, again, somebody who reclaims the story with his camera, what he calls his video camera, as sort of a guerrillero sort of tool for actually guerrilla filming. It's called Besmette Stad, the Infected City, was for Belgian television.
Fuck the police coming straight from the underground. A young nigga got it bad cause I'm brown. And not the other shit cause I need to run.
Alright, I'm getting down. I'm getting down. Give me a chance. I'm getting down. Give me a chance. I didn't do anything. Give me a chance. Put your fucking hands. Alright, I'll fucking crack your skull. You got me? Yeah, I got you. Get the fuck out of here. Alright. They tried to destroy my camera, but I got up and ran away. The camera's only slightly damaged and I still had the tape. Then I got my revenge. By that night, I had the tape on CBS and NBC, and by the next day, it made every broadcast. And by the end of the week, it made every channel and every broadcast.
This is Channel 2 News Sunday. Everything you need to know, because anything can happen in New York.
There was a 5-hour fury in an East Village park last night.
The video artist was recording the chaos on his home video camera when police came after him.
A preliminary police report into the...
Did some officers
Police brutality.
may have used excessive force?
TV tapes.
Tompkins Square Park.
Nothing's been the same ever since, you know. I've been getting death threats. I've been hounded by photographers and news crews and newspapers, and you know, I've been doing testimony at the grand jury and making complaints all over the place. You know, I had the FBI involved. It was a real trip, man.
Such an ass mother. You got the whole police force out to get you, stupid son of a you mother you.
Now his answering machine is filled with threats.
I want him to know that if at any time he believes he's in danger by virtue of harassment, to call me. I will help him and I will protect him.
The whole thing about the riot was exposed through the media because of my tape, because the mayor and the police commissioner were denying everything. But, you know, on my tape I had police beating up people and their badges covered and all things like that.
Video is a tool, it's a weapon, and it's a witness. All these things happening around us these days, if we bury our heads in the sand, we're going to get our ass cut off, you know?
Okay. I want to show an example from the film that will be screened here tomorrow, soundtrack to Redatelj, where actually music as a part, music not only as a propaganda tool, which is also part of the film, but also music as a tool of liberation and tool of rebellion. And it's actually given away at the end of the film, but I think it's crucial because it also shows another example of civil disobedience where you can reclaim the story, but this time through the music. And this is Abby Lincoln together with the Women's Rights Coalition in Harlem, Maya Angelou, the novelist and writer and playwright. It was a guy who crashed the Security Council in 1961, mid-February 1961, at the protest of the murder of Patrice Lumumba, the first elected premier leader of the Belgian Congo when it became independent.
We have all learned this morning by the Katanga authorities of the reported death of Patrice Lumumba and two of his colleagues. The issue then is simply this: shall the United Nations survive? Shall the attempt to bring about peace by the concerted power of international understanding be discarded?
Today we're here to mourn the cruel murder of Patrice Lumumba. This is no communist begin. This is the angry black man figure.
And so here is Abby Lincoln herself, literally at the Security Council, literally also screaming. You see, it was a guy who actually screams in a similar fashion. It's not her, but there's sort of an overlap between the music composition and what was happening in the Security Council organized by musicians. It's a little bit to explain what's going on with the films. That for me what's crucial is actually to try to twist the story upside down and try to reclaim or question very much what the mainstream story is. From soundtrack, I'd like to give one more example because it's also been really true. And this is Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev at the time, the Soviet leader in 1960, who invited most world leaders, because in 1960 with the 15th General Assembly at the United Nations, it was not leaders of the countries that actually were present, but it was the representatives. And here in September 1960, upon invitation of Nikita Khrushchev, for the first time, all world leaders are about to head for New York, and this is including all non-aligned leaders like Tito was also present. Sukarno, Fidel Castro made his maiden speech, which is still the longest speech in the history of the United Nations, his maiden speech. There was Abdel Nasser Yawarhal Nehru, the leader of Egypt, Sekatoury, the leader of Guinea. You had the whole global South leaders, but also including President Eisenhower, who could not refuse, and he was telegramming with Macmillan, the leader of the United Kingdom, that they said we cannot make it to not be present at the United Nations General Assembly during September 1960, and so all world leaders were pretty much present. But what was happening at that very moment is that since 16 African countries are admitted to the World Body, you see a global shift happening in that 15th General Assembly. It's actually the global South and the Afro-Asian bloc that gains the majority vote. There's sort of a shift that is happening. It's a global earthquake that actually is suddenly visible in the United Nations, where the majority vote now belongs to the global South. And so now the East and West will both scramble to get a hold of that vote. One, the United States would actually send in arm twisters. These are actually secret CIA agents that would buy votes and sort of wrestle control of the United Nations General Assembly body. Nikita Khrushchev, on the other hand, he will propose the independence, the decolonization resolution 1514, meaning that actually colonization will be made illegal. And that's resolution 1514 that will be ratified 14 December 1960. And here you see that Nikita Khrushchev sort of being demonized in the United States, which at one point, even literally, he says, we have to bury colonialism, which was mistranslated in the United States as we're going to bury the United States, which was completely mistranslated. And still today, if you look at the history books in the United States, it's still what's being translated. Not only that, at one point, he will actually take out his shoe. There's no images of that, but we found the audio in the audio memoirs that he recorded when he was dethroned. He was actually overthrown in 1964 by Brezhnev and renegated to his dacha where he was prisoner, or in exile in his own country, in his own dacha, where he was recording all his video memoirs for 7 years, which we worked through for the soundtrack to Burita. But at one moment he literally said, I was upset, I took my shoe and I slammed the shoe. Now what I did not know actually that the shoe had to do with the history of my own country, where he was criticizing how Belgium, together with the United Nations, because the Secretary General at the time, UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, was actually complicit with the overthrow of the first newly elected leader, democratically elected leader, Patrice Lumumba. And so for the dealing of Dag Hammarskjöld and my country in the Congo, he was actually upset and trying to actually have his voice heard through slamming the shoe. Let me show that example, which is at the beginning of soundtrack to Kurita.
How do you remember 1960? Years from now, when you tell your children about this year we've been living through, what scenes will spring to your mind? The chief of communism pounding a table in rage? What sounds will you hear?
In the UN, when Khrushchev took off his shoe and was beating that shoe, and the interpreter said that he was saying, "I'll bury you," talking about America. Khrushchev wasn't saying, "I'll bury you." Khrushchev was saying, "I love you." But it was the interpreter who hated America. You understand what I mean?
But did he have rhythm?
Yeah, he had rhythm, right? Rhythm is my business.
конец злодею колониальному рабству. Долой его и похоронить его чем лучше, тем лучше.
И накал обостренности был до предела. Я взял туфли и туфли начал писать.
So again, it's a musician, Dizzy Gillespie, who reclaims that story and said, you know, Nikita Khrushchev didn't say, oh, we're going to bury the United States. He did say, however, in 1956, when he was denouncing Stalin, communism will bury capitalism. There's a very different notion than saying we're going to bury America with missiles. But so it's Dizzy Gillespie who actually recounting the story and reclaiming that story, saying he didn't say we're going to bury you, he said, I love you. In other words, meaning we have to get rid of colonialism. And so Dizzy Gillespie is siding with Nikita Khrushchev. So the film starts in a sense with already trying to recount the mainstream storytelling of what happened in 1960. I have plenty more examples of so I reclaiming the storytelling. I'd like to give one more example, which actually goes back to a film by Godard, because we're going to see also Alphaville, which is part of Everyday Words is Appeal, which is spliced with, it's sort of a confrontation between what's going on in Alphaville and what Michael Hart is talking about in the film you're about to see later after the masterclass. I'll introduce the film then later on. But again, you have a Godard film, but also you have Muntazar al-Zaidi, we have Mahmoud Darwish. And Mahmoud Darwish was asking the story, you know, can a country that doesn't have any poets reclaim its story of the land? Can it actually exist as a country without storytellers? I'm showing Mahmoud Darwish because we're also going to see a short film later on that I made together with the poem of Mahmoud Darwish. But this is not the music by Jean-Luc Godard. But what's interesting is how, again, here, from the perspective of a Palestinian poet, how he tries to reclaim the story of what's going on with Palestine and also Gaza.
Je n'ai que des cauchemars. Alors qu'un ami de Haïfa me dit que lui, dans ses rêves, il ne rêvait pas de l'ennemi, mais de lui-même. Pas d'Israël, mais de la Palestine. Est-ce qu'on pourrait partir de là? De la terre, de la promesse, et ensuite du pardon. מחמוד דרוויש, כתבת, זה הכופה את ההיסטוריה שלו, יורש את ארץ המילים. האם אתה לא ממעיט בקשר של הישראלים עם האדמה הזו? כשאתה מוסיף שאין מקום למשורר ההומרי, ושאתה מנסה להיות המשורר של טרויה, ושאתה אוהב מובסים, תיזהר, אתה מתחיל להישמע יהודי.
آمل ذلك، فهذا أمر حسن الصيت في هذه الأيام، لكن الحقيقة لها وجهان. لقد استمعنا إلى الرواية الإغريقية وسمعنا أحيانا صوت الضحية الطروادية على لسان يوريبيدس. أما أنا فإنني أبحث عن شاعر طروادة، لأن طروادة لم تروي حكايتها، وأتساءل هل الشعب أو البلد الذي له شعراء كبار يملك الحق في السيطرة على شعب آخر لا شعراء له؟ وهل غياب الشعر عند شعب يشكل سببا كافيا لهزيمته؟ هل الشعر إيماء أم هو أحد أدوات السلطة؟ هل بإمكان شعب أن يكون قويا دون أن يكتب شعرا؟ أنا ابن شعب غير معترف به بما فيه الكفاية حتى الآن، أريد أن أتكلم باسم الغائب، باسم شاعر طروادة. فإن الوحي الشعري والمشاعر الإنسانية قد تظهر أكبر في الهزيمة مما هي في النصر. في الخسارة أيضا شاعرية عميقة، وقد تكون هناك شاعرية أعمق في الخسارة. ولو كنت أنتمي إلى معسكر المنتصرين لشاركت في مظاهرات التضامن مع الضحايا. هل تعلمين لماذا نحن الفلسطينيين مشهورون؟ لأنكم أنتم أعداؤنا. إن الاهتمام بنا نابع من الاهتمام بالمسألة اليهودية. نعم، الاهتمام بك وليس بي أنا. إذن نحن قليلو الحظ في أن تكون إسرائيل هي عدونا، لأنها تحظى بمؤيدين لا حد لهم في العالم. ونحن أيضا محظوظون لأن تكون إسرائيل عدونا، لأن اليهود هم مركز اهتمام العالم. لذلك ألحقتم بنا الهزيمة وأعطيتمونا الشهرة. لقد ألحقتم بنا الهزيمة ولكن منحتمونا الشهرة.
אנחנו שר התעמולה שלכם.
نعم، أنتم وزارة دعايتنا.
Okay. I'd like to confront us with one last excerpt, and then I'd like to go to the methodology, the different trajectory, and show with how I construct the films. But this is very much at the core of how I would go about imagining the storytelling in the films, is trying to get at another story which is not told, or the story that is twisted being retold from another perspective. This is an excerpt of the film we're about to see this evening, but I thought it was crucial to also insert it here as sort of an addendum to the Mahmoud Hafiz story, about reclaiming the story. So the history is very much about the history of airplane hijacking, but also the history of airplane hijacking, how it's being told through the news, and how it's being reclaimed by actually the hijacker himself. But the evolution in the film is that actually that the hijacker has been hijacked by the media itself. So again, it's a storytelling that has hijacked the hijacker.
Well over 50% are paranoid schizophrenic, and the others may well one day be or have been. A large number of them are very acutely suicidal, so to threaten a skyjacker with the possibility of death is like telling a child, if you'll be bad, I'll give you candy. There are certain rather uniform characteristics about them, including a most unusual aspect of dream life in which they dream of being able to fly. It's rather startling to talk to a 50-year-old man and have him tell you a 7-year-old child's dream, and at the same moment know that this man has committed a crime on board an aircraft in which he's forced the pilot to make his dream come true. There's one little airline that has real shortcut skirts and real sexy sort of a rig. And that one little airline has been hit in complete disproportion to the magnitude of the traffic that it hauls. But here is a man who has really no sexual experience at all, and he looks at a hostess as a sexual symbol, and when he takes his gun and sticks it in this good-looking girl's belly and says, honey, we're going all the way to Cuba, he may very well be making the first sexual gesture in his life, and he often comments with pleasure how happy he was to see the fear in her eye. First time in his life he's ever scared a woman.
Westerners, you don't understand. You have all the Israeli propaganda, and you think the Arabs, you know, they're the dirty Arabs, and for us we have to fight outside our territory, and we have to bring the whole world to understand our case.
The people that you helped to release were responsible for the death of a small child. What are your feelings about that?
Could I answer this? You just said a death of a small child. I want to ask you, the death of 30 children of a school in Egypt, the death of about 70 human workers in Egypt, the death of people in Irbid here, the death of many human beings who have been killed and murdered, I could say, by the Israelis.
In a sense, when we think about hijacking, we can make an argument against science. Because if it hadn't been for science, we wouldn't have had airplanes. If we didn't have airplanes, we wouldn't have had airplane hijacking. And so we could argue, therefore, it would have been better if we wouldn't have had science.
Well, I've got a wristwatch and...
Okay, in a sense, what the hijacking is as a storytelling in this film is also reclaiming or twisting around the mainstream story by actually détournement, like hijacking the meaning of what it stands for. And when Leila Khaled flew her plane over Haifa, is actually where she used to live, where she saw her friend being killed in the street, and she had to flee to southern Lebanon and then made it to Amman in Jordan. She actually renamed the plane as the independent state of Palestine when they were flying over Haifa. Okay, any questions or feedback or comments or contradictions or questions? Or you can also ask them later. We have a 15-minute or 30-minute Q&A afterwards. What I would like to shift gears and take it a bit to the methodology, which is a totally different story, but it's bear with me, but I'd like to build up a bit of a story how, and more in detail, is about the film Double Take, which is about a Hitchcock doubleganger, but it's also about how film is a doubleganger of reality, how it twists reality, how it reclaims the storytelling of reality. And it's by way of television culture. The big difference between TV and cinema, and Double Take is very much zooming in on the beginning of the 60s again. Soundtrack is very similar, but it's more a political sort of approach to the 1960s. The story in Double Take is very much about the rise of the culture of fear through television, and how television was disseminating and defining how East and West was sort of divided between two ideologies. And in particularly the big shift, because 1960 is also a moment where a lot of cinemas are closing down, 30-40% of cinemas are closing down because television is on the rise. But the big difference between television and cinema is that while you go to the cinema and you sit in a black box and there's a beginning and an ending, and then you leave the cinema when your film is finished, on television the image never finishes. You know, there's only a commercial break, there's an intervention that is actually in the middle. But even if you turn on television, it still keeps going on. Of course, we talk about television. Television is very much now a nostalgic tool, I would say. It's sort of obsolete, and what's going on with the commercials that actually we now carry our iPhone in our pocket, and actually the commercial or that culture of fear is actually constantly present with us. And soon it will be even more invasive because it will be part of how it's being bioengineered or being plugged into the way our body would work. But I wanted to have a historical investigation at the beginning of the 60s, how that rise of the culture with fear is sort of goes hand in hand of how TV language was being developed. And so I'd like to take you through, it's a bit the history of the TV commercial. And I'll take you through the history of the TV dinner. There's a product, Swanson. Swanson brought out the TV dinner, but the TV dinner came about when the CEO of Swanson had 270 tons leftover of turkey and didn't know what to do with it. He had just taken a plane, had seen the in-flight tray, and he thought maybe I can make an in-flight tray with the rest of the turkey and advertise it as a TV dinner. But what's remarkable is with the TV dinner is that it starts bit by bit as it invades the family makeup. Bit by bit, TV becomes becomes a family member, and it sort of redefines what the family ritual is of the TV dinner in the evening. And so with the TV dinner, you can stay parked in front of the television. You don't have to run to the fridge anymore during a commercial break, or you don't have to actually sit around the TV dinner and watch television. You can actually be parked in front of the television with the TV dinner. But I'd like to take you through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s very quickly of how that TV commercial in essence is changing in the way it's storytelling. So it is what it is. So it explains the makeup of the TV dinner, appetizer, the turkey, the potato, the I don't know if it's the apple mousse or something, and then the dessert. And so it's pretty blunt on what it is. It's one-on-one. Now the next commercial, you will see the families introduced. So what's being sold is not just a TV dinner, but what's being sold is also an ideology. In essence, the ideology of the happy consumer, the family, the nuclear family, that is the ideal consumption unit of sort of post-war capitalism. And you see mommy and dad in a suburban home. Now the suburban home, why? It's because the car is there. And with the car you can drive to the supermarket, but with the car you can also actually drive to the suburbs. And so you have the nuclear family, mommy, daddy, and kid with the fridge, with the car, with the suburban home, actually being controlled by television where the commercial is being disseminated over distance in a television that also becomes part of that nuclear family.
Guess we'll have to send Daddy to the store every time.
Huh?
This turkey is delicious, and the slices are bigger. Why, you brought home the best frozen dinner we ever had.
Well, I guess I can't take all the credit. You see, when I was down at the store today, so darn many frozen dinners.
Trust Swanson. That's what most folks do. They're the ones. No comparison.
So, I took Swanson.
So from now on, we'll always take Swanson.
Yes, trust Swanson every time.
So most of the commercial is actually the family, so another story is being sold. And you have a quasi-emancipated man, because you also have the gender roles that are being defined in a quasi-emancipated guy who actually takes care of the food and the kitchen. So the next one is, we jump to the 60s, but the nuclear family is about to change. So you have the liberation, the sexual liberation, where the nuclear family is completely being redefined. There is sort of a subversive style to the storytelling, but actually is absorbed and appropriated again to sell the products. What you see also, what disseminates bit by bit, because there's a borrowing of aesthetic codes between Hollywood and TV. And so bit by bit, you see how the commercial also, as a mini storytelling, as a mini film, is adopting Hollywood style, Hollywood codes to actually tell its story. So there's the whole commercial is sort of disguised as a quasi Hitchcock movie, as a rip-off of Psycho.
It's you, Harry. For a minute there, you startled me.
I got some pizza.
Pizza? Harry, I don't have time to make pizza.
Did I say anything about making pizza? It's frozen. See? Gino's.
Gino's? I didn't know they made a frozen pizza.
It's right there in the freezer section. You think Gino's wouldn't make a frozen pizza that bakes in 10 minutes for people in a hurry?
Oh, Harry, be tender.
Of course it'll be tender. I'm gonna put it in the oven right now.
I hope you do, Harry. It's getting pretty cold against my back.
So again, you have the quasi-emancipated guy who takes care of the kitchen. Now let's go to the Revenge of the Housewife, which is disguised. The next clip is a mini commercial that is disguised as a sort of a horror B-movie. But again, it's the way roles are defined between man and woman are a bit laughable.
Now, from banquet comes
What is it, Cynthia? What is it?
Giblet gravy and sliced turkey.
Yes, giblet gravy and sliced turkey, together in the most significant frozen dish of our time, buffet supper.
Winner of 3 Banquet Academy Awards. Best sliced turkey.
Best performance by a giblet gravy in a supporting role.
Best performance by a housewife.
I just put it in the oven, and by it was done. And I had a delicious buffet supper. Oh, yes, I did. Slices of turkey, all covered with gravy and little bitty giblets. Do you hear me?
From the same producers who brought you Beef Stew,
Salisbury steak with gravy,
and the unforgettable chicken and dumplings, comes the outstanding banquet production of the 20th century, giblet gravy and sliced turkey.
Color by Paprika, now appearing citywide in a frozen food section near you.
So of course, the connection to Hollywood is very obvious. It's trying this competition between Hollywood and television. The next one, I'm not going to show the whole decades, but let's jump to the 2000s. And what's remarkable is suddenly, you know, in between the 70s, 80s are happening. You have the extended family, then you have the extended family, meaning, you know, grandma and grandpa are part of the family, or then you have sort of the multiculti family where they're catering to African American community, etc., etc. But this one is remarkable because suddenly the family's completely disappeared, and one thinks like, what's going on with this woman in a great mansion eating a TV dinner? And again, it's gender politics that libertinizes the product to sell it even better.
Something Swanson has gone cheap. With one things like green chicken penne in a basil cream sauce. Fortunately, TV dinner etiquette still applies. The old Swanson, food that's in fashion.
So remark also that the commercials get very, very short. Because there was in the 80s also a call for zap-proof commercials because people were zapping away. The remote control did its entry, and you had so many channels that people started to zap around to actually get away from the commercials. And so there was zap-proof commercials that made that the commercial became much shorter. From 30 seconds, they became 15 seconds. But also what you see had zap-proof commercial in the sense where you don't know where the commercial ends or where the commercial begins between the program, because the credits would be sort of omitted, or the product would sort of be more obscurely advertised, or it would be cut into parts where you have a cliffhanger in the middle. I'll show you a cliffhanger in a minute. But what's up with this one is, for me, you know, it's not so much about the TV dinner, but actually it sells the ideology of if you buy a TV dinner, you get also a big grand mansion with it. In a sense, you actually buy a lifestyle. You don't just buy sort of a TV dinner. And it's very much about the 99% versus the 1%. It's sort of a whole way of how the world was being redefined. If all post-war America, and I'm talking America because television was very much, and with the commercial was very much reconceived, and its storytelling was very much conceived after post-war, because the film industry in Europe was in shackles, and so TV storytelling could take over in the United States. But I forgot my thread now. Okay. But let's continue. I'll show you the cliffhanger as well. And again, you will see that tension between how Hollywood storytelling is being appropriated for the product.
Here, reach, now.
I can't. I'm slipping.
Come on, I've got you. Up.
I can't make it. I'm slipping.
Introducing a new hand cream that leaves no greasy feeling behind. New Johnson's hand cream.
So basically you jump from Hitchcock to a commercial. I found, this is not my film, but I found this little clip by Matthias Muller, who made this in the 90s. And this is an analysis, again, I jumped to a little bit of another analysis of Hollywood codes, but it's remarkable how he was able to analyze the femininity, the gestures of femininity in just analyzing and slicing one after the other the gestures of women in the Hitchcock classic era. It doesn't mean that actually in reality women behaved like that, but it was a dissemination of how actually women were portrayed in mainstream media, which we're at the time of the beatniks. There's a whole different thing is happening in society, but at the same time what's being portrayed in Hollywood is very different. So is the woman running to her bliss or to her doom? I don't know. But I think that's the storytelling in essence, the way it chose to actually end it with the woman escaping. But what's interesting is that you never see what's outside of the story, what's outside of the frame is the thread that you never see. But hence also that it makes the woman feel trapped in the home, but also it makes that actually it makes it very psychological. And one could question, is this a documentary or is this fiction? And I would argue this is as much documentary as fiction, because it analyzes in essence how mainstream Hollywood in its classic era in the 50s, 60s was actually making, in a sense, constructing a gender stereotype that is very much sort of analyzed in a very documentary fashion. What I like to do, we're 1 hour in now, so 15 minutes. What I like to do is actually take you to double take, where, because I always wanted to make a film with 5 commercial breaks, where actually the commercial breaks were very much part of the story. And it's a coffee commercial, and of course, if it's dealing with a Hitchcock doppelganger, the premise of the film is that when Hitchcock meets his doppelganger, in a sense, he says, you know, if you meet a doppelganger, you have to kill him, otherwise he will kill you. So there is sort of a murder plot being set up between him and his doppelganger. But it will be Hitchcock, the TV maker, where Hitchcock had crossed over to television, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and then 1963 became 1 hour, which was the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, where as a filmmaker, he was crossing over to television. And you have Hitchcock as the filmmaker. And there is sort of a cross-fertilization that is going on as well, because the fact that every 10 minutes you had to interrupt the TV story, and Hitchcock was always laughing with the commercial break, so much so that he said, I will actually introduce the commercial myself, but I will give you an anti-commercial, like I will brush my teeth and my teeth will fall out, or I will vacuum the floor and then the vacuum cleaner will explode. And he said that would even sell more. He was actually very prophetic, because in a sense nowadays we have anti-commercial that actually sell the product even more than actually the real sort of commercial. But there's something interesting about Hitchcock crossing over, because when he crossed over to TV in 1956, in 1959 he takes back his TV crew to film Psycho. And Psycho is black and white because it was filmed with his TV crew. But also what's remarkable that Janet Leigh is killed after 20 minutes. And he does so because he got the idea of the cliffhanger of the commercial, that actually you had to tell very short stories in your TV story, in your TV episodes, where every 10 minutes you had to interrupt the program, have a cliffhanger to take you across the commercial break. And so what he does with Psycho is actually in revenge, he kills his most expensive asset, which is the celebrity, which is the Hollywood actors. And he kills her 20 minutes in, which was unheard of, which was actually sensational. And that's why he also pushed that people had to be in the film from the very beginning. And so here we have how TV is actually redefining the language in Hollywood and vice versa. And so I'd like to take you to 2 or 3, 4 commercials in double take.
The end of the script. One of you must die.
But first we have another device which can bring tears to the eyes of the more fastidious. A television commercial.
Oh, Mr. McGregor. Oh, thank heavens you're still here.
Oh, I was just about to go home. What's wrong, Janie?
I've got to do something about my coffee.
Is your coffee really that bad, Janie?
Jim says it's awful. What can I do?
Better try this.
Instant Folgers. Is it good?
Tastes good as fresh perked.
I'll try it.
Great coffee. And the folks loved it.
It's Instant Folgers. Tastes good as fresh perked.
And now join me, if you will, while we contemplate the perfect crime.
So what sort of also doubled in the film is a political backdrop to the intimate dialogue between Hitchcock and Hitchcock. So Hitchcock and Hitchcock having a dialogue, which is a fictional story, is set against the backdrop of East and West. That actually in 1959, where Vice President Nixon is visiting the American exhibition in Moscow, when he meets Nikita Khrushchev in the kitchen. And so it's called the kitchen debate. So you have the big kitchen debate between two guys talking about the missiles and jazz and etc. and kitchen appliances. And then you have the mini micro-political kitchen debate where the woman in the Folgers coffee is so-called unable to put coffee. It's very misogynic, sort of, in a sense, sexist that actually the woman cannot make coffee. But you will see that as the film progresses, it's the coffee that will be the means by which one Hitchcock will kill the other Hitchcock. And so the coffee commercial will become the revenge. And that's how it actually is inserted in several parts of the film. But first, the political backdrop.
Vice President Nixon escorts Soviet Premier Khrushchev on a preview of the United States Fair in Moscow. It's the official opening of the American Exposition, dedicated to showcasing the high standard of life in our country. But on this occasion, traditional diplomacy goes by the board by a crackling exchange between Nixon and Khrushchev, begun off camera and finished off before the American Ampex color videotape recorders.
This is a special report on one of the most unusual diplomatic events in recent history.
Featuring on the one hand, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, the irrepressible and outspoken leader of communism. On the other, the Vice President of the United States, Richard Nixon, cast in the role of defender of capitalism and American foreign policy. Part of the unscheduled fireworks was recorded on videotape. We only want to live with Americans in peace and friendship because we ourselves are a powerful country and we will be friendly with each other. Other countries will be friendly too. And if anybody comes in a fighting mood, we could pull his ear ever so little and tell him, don't dare. Wars are not allowed now. This is a time of atomic weapons. Any fool could start a war, but no person in his right mind would want the war to continue.
Baby, baby, where did our love go? And all your promises of a love forevermore. Baby, baby, I've got this yearning, burning, yearning, feeling inside me, ooh, deep inside me, and it hurts so bad.
Good evening. I can tell by the rude noises you are making that you are impatient to see our film. However, there will be a slight delay. Tonight, as a special attraction, we shall present some television commercials. They will be injected at various points during our picture to keep you from getting too engrossed in the story.
You mean it's as bad as yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
No improvement at all?
Mm-mm.
Now what am I gonna do? Oh, Mary, hi. Hello, Jane. Listen, help me out, will you? Harold hates my coffee. What kind do you use? Instant Folgers. Instant Folgers? Tastes good as fresh perked.
Gene, this coffee is delicious.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same kind we've been using, is it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I'll jump to the next part. There's two pretty straightforward. So this is the moment of Sputnik, which caused a lot of consternation and fear within the United States, upon which the United States answered with another, the Telstar satellite, which in the beginning didn't go off and became a Flopnik instead of a Sputnik.
There's never any solution in panic.
The rocket that launched Sputnik number 2 is capable of carrying a 1.5 ton hydrogen bomb warhead.
The Russians have licked some of the toughest problems on the basis of the so-called ultimate weapon.
Let's quit acting as if nothing happened, because something has happened, and it has embarrassed us throughout the world.
Not just our pride, but our security is at stake. The Russians will leave us behind and wait.
That the country is in dire trouble.
This may be our last chance to provide the means of saving Western civilization from annihilation.
Flying saucers have invaded our planet. Washington, London, Paris, the whole world is under attack.
The next shot will be the Vanguard going aloft. It is hoped to carry the first U.S. satellite into orbit in outer space.
The U.S. scientists realize the world is watching and waiting, and the Americans who sweat this one out at Cape Canaveral know their fledgling is on the spot.
Well, you have just witnessed a severe propaganda defeat for this country.
We slowly turn our eyes back to the charms of television advertising.
Honey, your coffee's undrinkable.
It's pretty harsh.
Well, so's your coffee. You know, the girls down at the office make better coffee on their hot plates.
And he didn't even kiss me goodbye. You know, if I could just make a decent cup of coffee, I could relax. So, relax. Why don't you try Instant Folgers?
Hey, great coffee.
Better than those girls make at the office.
Instant Folgers taste good as fresh perked.
Very nasty.
Anyway, the rockets fail in macro-political arena, and then the coffee fails in the micro-political arena, so there's sort of a mirror going on. But I jump, because we're sort of around 15 in them, I'm jumping to a part where you see the changeover, how the coffee becomes the murder weapon. I'm skipping a couple of scenes and skip a lot of the film, but then I'm going a bit further.
Nothing is what it seems. In Cuba, an agent visits his mistress and no one asks why.
Frankly, I feel that television commercials are ideally suited to this type of program. This next one, for example, it's deadly.
Oh, this coffee is criminal.
Honey, you killed the petunias.
Then you admit it. Your coffee really is murder.
Papa eating my coffee, it's murder.
You see, crime does not pay. You must have a sponsor.
Try Folgers, mountain grown for richer flavor.
Well, all right.
You know, it's a crime.
Maybe we loved cinema so much we annihilated it, I ventured.
The mountains.
It's possible, he concurred.
Ooh.
We always fell in love with our characters. That's why we killed them. We lingered for a while on the pleasures of murder. I argued that dying was an act of love, of complete surrender. We always played our crimes as though they were love scenes. Intimate and domestic, he murmured in agreement. Television brought murder into the American home, where it always belonged. So tell me, how would you like to die? Come now, he mocked me. We have imagined every type of murder, shooting, strangulation, stabbing, being hurled to death from a national monument, marriage, oh yes, marriage. Marriage can be very deadly. Some of our most exquisite murders have been conjugal, performed in all tenderness with the aid of a kitchen appliance. Personally, I like poison. It can only be administered to those who trust their killer. The family, spouses, lovers. Murder is a gift, like love. So tell me, how would you like to die?
So bit by bit, you change the codes of the commercial, you take away the voice, and then you add the psycho music. And suddenly, bit by bit, even with also the voiceover that was written by Tom McCarthy, who actually twists this sort of love and murder as sort of the opposites of one another. Truffaut used to say to Hitchcock as well, that you portray your murders as love embraces and your embraces as murder acts. And so this contradiction is interesting in the storytelling, where suddenly the commercial comes to stand for the murder act. But this is in a nutshell. It's very short, sort of the content about the cognitive dissonance and the twisting of the storytelling, and then the twisting in the methodology where you turn the codes upside down of how you tell the story. But this is sort of two aspects that I wanted to sort of zoom in on. But maybe there's questions or.
I have a question about your research process, and maybe what is your background in education or personal education, because you seem to use a lot of archival footage, and how do you actually find it? And it seems to be like a very long process, so if you could tell us a bit about that.
My background is actually cultural anthropology, which maybe stems from, you don't have to say, to me, cultural anthropology is still a stepchild of colonialism, right? And so the very first film I made was actually set in New Guinea, where I was asked, where is your helicopter? And I had to walk for half a week. And it was, in essence, the story of how anthropologists had come down in that region with geologists as harbingers of the extraction economy that was about to come. Because I have to say, a week ago, where I was in New Guinea, these villages have been bombed because of the resources. There's copper and gold mountain in that area, and I didn't know, but at the time, some of those villages were napalmed by the Indonesian military. And so I would even say cultural anthropology is the West collecting, in a sense, collecting cultures. It's about collecting as well, but it's trying to, about this collecting, to actually question it. And the film became very much about the anthropology of spinning the story around. But as much as with history and with collecting and with archiving, you know, I think we have to decolonize also our memories. And archive stems for me, it's actually a metaphor for our memories, our collective memories. And I think our collective memories are the area of contest, where I would say history is not the past, as with James Baldwin. History is not the past, it's our present, and it's our present makeup of how we actually, from the past, are defining our present. And it's a contested area. And so I think memory has to be re-questioned. Also, you know, to whom belongs these memories, right? The collective memory is for a big part owned by big corporations. So I think piracy, in the sense of hijacking of détournement, turning archives or history upside down, is that we have to reclaim also those archives, and we have to reclaim those memories, and a past where we sort of standing in a I would say a tunnel vision, a tunnel reality, that we actually have a very narrow view of what that is. And to name just a few, as like with Mahmoud Darwish, when he talks about the memory of a country and the storytellers of a country. If a country doesn't have storytellers, or those storytellers have been omitted of history, do you have still that country? And so it's a huge question, the question of memory and archives. We can of course go into sort of the nitty-gritty of the archives, because that's a whole job on itself. And so with the previous film, Soundtrack to Kulita, which basically for a big part, but also this one, it's playing around with television, with the news, with all the Hitchcock introductions, but then taking them into my own story, where there's a narrative being written by Tom McCarthy, knitting all this sort of archives into one big story. But that's a job in itself. And of course it's partially appropriation, but it's reclaiming history, as what Voltaire would say, you know, history is the line we commonly agree upon. And it's opening that line to sort of retelling that history in a different way.
Thank you.
And it's the same with the archives, yeah. I know there's a lot of, maybe 10 people from the workshop that will continue tomorrow and after tomorrow. And we can pick up questions of what you've seen as well. I will continue showing all the stuff also in the group sessions. But please also in those group sessions take it back to your own sort of work as well. And even today, if you want to ask questions when it relates to your own work, the questions are welcome.
Your latest film, Soundtrack for the Kulita, has many elements, and it's edited in a very jazzy way. Could you maybe walk us a bit through the process of how did you compose the film? How did you make all the elements work?
Soundtrack will be shown tomorrow. I think it's at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock?
7.
At 7 o'clock. And then we can also, in the Q&A, talk further about how the film was constructed. But there's 3 layers that for me are important in Soundtrack to Coup d'Etat. One is the historical story of how my country was involved, and even the monarchy was involved in that assassination together in cahoots with President Eisenhower. So this is really assassination on a very high level. And there's the historical sort of analysis of that murder, and there's new evidence that came out. There was a book published by Little de Witte that was released in 1999, and it set forth a parliamentary commission. And in that parliamentary commission, Belgium admitted that actually it was in the know. But Little de Witte has actually found evidence that the Belgian state was complicit with that murder, and that the king was in the know. And so all that new evidence is part of the film as well. For example, there was an interview by William Burden. William Burden was the president of the Museum of Modern Art, but he was also the advisor to the Pentagon. He was the CEO of Lockheed Martin, the defense contractor, and he had stakes in the mining industry in East Congo. But he was appointed ambassador to Belgium. He was the US ambassador to Brussels. And he actually was also, and this is the president of the Museum of Modern Art, who was a secret CIA agent. And he was writing telegrams, cables, to the CIA headquarters in Washington to actually argue for the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. We have this in audio, which is very explosive. We found it at Columbia University for the Department of Diplomatic Studies. And when we found the fact that he actually literally says on audio, we thought with the Belgians who were toying with the idea of assassinating Patrice Lumumba, we thought it wouldn't be a bad idea either. He was such a damn nuisance that we should go for a political assassination. These are his words that we have in the film, which were never released before. And so we use that as a twist point in the middle of the film. The film builds up to that whole joy of independence, and then it starts to change right at that moment where we zoom in on the assassination, because she was only leader for the independent Congo for 2 months and a half, because they were afraid they would steal, that he would actually make as a sovereign leader that also the Congolese people would benefit from the riches of Congo. So that story of Patrice Lumumba is one layer, but what's crucial is that when he was overthrown, he's overthrown by Mobutu, who actually sacks the whole government, and that's 15 September 1960. He does it 14 September, it's in news, 15 September 1960. Nikita Khrushchev is actually on the way to the United Nations in New York on the boat, the Baltica, with the East Bloc leaders. And he changes his speech. And we'll see that the United Nations as a backdrop, which is happening, the 15th General Assembly is happening 1 week after the overthrow, not the assassination, but the assassination being plotted while the extended General Assembly is happening all the way to October and then even into 1961. And for me, it's very pivotal because you have the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, where the West and my country was very important in that, in a neo-colonial grab. I think post-colonial is a misnomer. It's a neo-colonial grab of how the West was about to deal with this independence that was happening in the continent of Africa. But at the same time, 1 week later, 16 African countries make that global earthquake in the United Nations. And so for me, the United Nations becomes this sort of backdrop of the global story of what's going on in the Congo. And there you see that actually the decolonization will be proposed and ratified, and it's the end of empire, which is in a sense of hope. And it all the way goes to when the musicians, Abbey Lincoln and Zazina had shown before, where they crashed the Security Council, where it's musicians that actually take a role into actually this protest of Patrice Lumumba at the Security Council, at United Nations. And so you have the assassination, the United Nations, and then the music. But then the music is much more important as a protagonist. When I actually was researching the music bit by bit, I could not but actually note that actually music was a political agent, but so much so that I made it into a protagonist of the film. So the music is music from beginning to end. There's moments of silence as well that actually are contrapoints. But music became the protagonist, and the story is told through the point of view of the music. And so why there's the music that is used as a propaganda tool, There is, of course, in 1960, you have the jazz ambassadors that the United States, in essence, to reclaim sort of their voice, because while Nikita Khrushchev is proposing the decolonization resolution, the United States is sending jazz ambassadors to win the hearts and minds of the global South. But at the same time, African Americans, 22 million African Americans, were not allowed to vote. But still, Louis Armstrong was sent to the Congo, and Louis Armstrong, as a black jazz ambassador, is sent out at the right very moment when Patrice Lumumba is about to be killed. The scheming and the concoction of planning that assassination happens simultaneously as the sending out of the black jazz ambassador Louis Armstrong. And so Louis Armstrong arrives in Katanga, which is the East Congo, the richest province, but it's also where he's having dinner with Moshe Chombe, and Moshe Chombe, together with William Burton, he's not there, but it's Larry Devlin, the head of the CIA, are all together in the villa of Moshe Chombe, together with Louis Armstrong, the very night he's having his concert. You have the dinner with Larry Devlin, the head of the CIA, where at the very moment he will receive Mobutu and give him ransom money to kill and assassinate Patrice Lumumba. And so all these things come together where the music becomes a cover to actually hide that assassination. And so it's this schizophrenic moment where the music becomes the backdrop and is a propaganda tool, while Louis Armstrong is not in the know. And so music becomes a propaganda tool, but at the same moment, also music becomes a form of rebellion, what you see, what I just showed you earlier in the presentation. And so music is this both sort of elements of agency. And this is the jazz. You also have the rumba, because it's not just the jazz, the rumba, for example, the independence cha-cha, the rumba that is composed by Joseph Kabasele and African jazz. When Patrice Lumumba is being released from prison, and he's sent over to the round table in Brussels, where they actually going to decide, and where the Congolese, all the Congolese political parties in unanimity will claim independence. They're actually accompanied by the rumba musicians, African jazz, and Joseph Kabasele. And on the evening of the claim of independence, they composed the song Independence Cha-cha, which becomes a very important anthem all throughout the continent of Africa. It became a very important song that even in Rhodesia at the time, which became Zimbabwe, where Independence Cha-cha became the name of the Independence Party. And so also there, every bit of music of the rumba is so much linked to the political setting. And so while the politics is all about divide and conquer, the music is very much about how people are brought together. And it's sort of an agency, a historical agency, also liberation and rebellion. And so the three layers, the music, the assassination, and United Nations, which for me the United Nations is actually a metaphor for the global South. So you have more of the global backdrop of what's going on in the world, how there's a huge shift happening, the global South is waking up, but how the global South is being embodied through that music, and music as an agency. So that's a bit of construction, but maybe you had more specific questions to zoom in on more specifics about the archive, I don't know. Then of course there's the way it's been edited and the way the story is told.
Well, people haven't seen the film yet, so...
Right, well they saw two fragments. You saw two fragments. You saw Khrushchev and Dizzy Gillespie talking about, he's talking about the written, but he's talking about the politics and about United Nations, and you had a mix between the music and United Nations, and so this is what I'm trying to explain a bit. Or at the end, where the musicians are actually crashing the Security Council, but it's again, it's actually a concert we found on Belgian television. It's the African jazz. We Insist Freedom Now album by Max Roach and Abbie Lincoln, which you actually see the last track, Prayer, which is just a scream, basically. But everybody's welcome if you haven't seen the film tomorrow.
It's just in the line with this what you just said. So Mila Turajlić made two films that are also based on newsreels from Belgrade. And from her films, we found out that actually it is that France deliberately let go 16 countries in order to keep Algeria. Very aware of that? You didn't see that?
But it's a bit later, and the 16 countries, you know, in 1960,
yeah,
It was only Guinea, and that's in 1950, it's before 1960. But in 1960, when I talk about the 16 African countries that were becoming part of the UN body, they were not necessarily French colonies. That's a bit later. It's in the follow-up of the years to come. Nigeria, Algeria, Tunisia, there was a lot. Most of North Africa was still belonged to France. That was a little bit later. But there's Ghana, there's a lot of other countries that became independent, but 16 of them became part of the world body, which were not necessarily the French colonies. And that caused a huge shift.
Yeah, she just made that point, like that was the Algerian War, was the kind of crucial point in making this global South a player, in, as you also say, in the United Nations. But I wanted to make the point about the way that she tells the story, which is more like following the newsreel, let's say, way of saying or telling the story, while you use, as you said, music as a protagonist. And it's very, very difficult to follow the story. So I saw the film 3 times, and now when you're actually telling me what are the 3 layers, now I see the story better. I think that you almost made the film as in the manner of kind of using aesthetics of the video, music video, because it goes so fast with lettering and kind of. So it's really, really difficult to follow. So it almost. It's fantastic. I would see it like 1,000 times. I see it every day if it's possible, because it says a lot. But it's kind of, it doesn't give, it doesn't transmit, or it doesn't convey, I think everything that you wanted to say in just one screening. It's not enough. I think that that's the film that one has to see more than once.
I don't think you need to get everything at once. It's sort of a general sense that you can also enjoy it. In politics, it's not necessarily boring. You can also enjoy it. And it's actually, what I was trying to do is not music as a soundtrack. It's not music as a soundtrack. It's a soundtrack to a coup d'etat. So it's in essence, yes, aesthetically, it's edited the big part as a music video, hence it's called a soundtrack, but it's a soundtrack to a coup d'etat. And so every piece of music is very carefully chosen in relation to what's politically going on. In that sense, that the music is not just decoration, but the music is a political actor. When you see Abbie Lincoln screaming at the end of the film, you don't have to explain a lot. You see that it's the US ambassador's his maiden speech, Ian Stevenson, appointed by John F. Kennedy. He says, we're here together to actually say that Patrice Lumumba is killed. And then after what you just seen in the whole film, you've seen literally the whole concoction of the assassination. The scream as a song is enough to actually say what's going on. Because literally she was present at the United Nations. This is just one example. If Dizzy Gillespie says, he didn't say I bury you, I love you, it's metaphorically, but it's right on, it's spot on. And then he says, I slammed the shoe because he didn't listen to me. But every piece of music is there because there's a political aspect to it. The first rumba is Adulinga, Atandeli, sooner or later the world will change, which is very clear. It's an independent song. But when that song was brought out, he was actually put in prison for life, and the song was banned. And so every song, the first rumba, or even the first songs, are all very much each time related to the music. And I have to say, yes, it's not a conventional film, because I wanted to give prevalence to the music. And it's disguised as a music clip, but I see it more as an academic PDF where you have a lot of text, and the text is like hitting the nail on the head, where the text is also saying what it says. But it's very little, and there's always jokes full of contradictions. But to me, the film is more an academic PDF disguised as a music clip. And so it plays with all these genres. If that would take place with the commercial, it's still a murder story, and it's the politics against the intimate story of Hitchcock versus Hitchcock. But here is the music as a political agent, which is not the normal way of telling a story. It's actually taking music as the point of departure. So it's very different methodology. But still, it's not just decoration, it's the music as a political player.
You know, that's clear. I didn't want to demeanor the aesthetics. It's fantastic. I just want to say it's a film that it's not, that it requires more than one viewing. And you just said it's not conventional movie. And maybe those movies, you could say, okay, you have this movie and it plays 1 week in a row. And you really can see 7 days and it will be not enough. That was my point, you know, because it's so layered. And it's definitely very much of the academic, or not even academic, because academia is sometimes very bad at conveying data that you showed. What is actually neo-imperialism in its essence. You showed it. So
I was, you know, because of its controversial way of storytelling, I thought it would be too controversial and experimental, but actually that exactly made it cross over to mainstream. It actually played for 6 months in the United States, it played 8 months in Belgium, it's playing now 3 months in France. I did not expect that because I was staying truthful to the experimental way of storytelling by way of the music, but that's actually why it crossed over to a mainstream audience. So for one way or another, I see it sort of works, but again, you know, you don't have to understand everything all at once in this film. There's many, many details. So
I was just curious about the starting point for soundtrack to Coup d'Etat. If it was something of a theme that you were interested in yourself, and through research you found out that this was something that maybe more people should know about, or the research for the movie started because you knew this was a movie in the making, a story that needed to be told that people didn't know about, maybe.
Well, it started from the fact that I'm born in Belgium, and it's a story that's never told. You don't learn this in school. And so for me, I thought it was crucial to open it up, and instead of being wiped under the carpet, that it's sort of part of, because it's Belgian television as well, it's both television stations that were producing it. And so I thought it was crucial to tell this story. Now, it's not because I'm not born in Gaza, or that I'm not born in East Congo, that I cannot speak in solidarity. And so if I might speak to the fact how the film is constructed in the way of the storytelling itself, I did not want to tell myself that story. I invited. That's maybe why the film is also a bit more complex, because it's kaleidoscopic and contradictory. But I feel a story like that should never be finished, or never be complete, or never fully understood, but in a way where you can actually juxtapose stories against one another to try to understand what happened. And so hence that I invited Nikita Khrushchev and the audio memoirs that we got through Sergei Khrushchev. I got in touch with Yves Blouin, the daughter of André Blouin, because I found only little remarks about André Blouin. I thought his story was so crucial to be told from the perspective of women who were not allowed to vote and not allowed to be part of the government, but nevertheless that she had a women's organization of 45,000 voices that actually helped into sort of the majority of the vote towards helping towards Patrice Lumumba, where subsequently she became the advisor to Patrice Lumumba. But here you have a voice of a woman that was part of Patrice Lumumba's party, that wrote memoirs from first-hand experience, where she knew that actually she was on a death list, and also Patrice Lumumba was on a death list. So I got in touch with Yves Blouin, and I thought it was crucial to tell the story partially through her words. Then the third is the Conor Cruz O'Brien, who was the Irish representative. And he firsthand had seen the genocide of the Belgians during the reign even of Patrice Lumumba at the end of the 1960s in North Katanga. And this is a story that's never been told in Belgium. Still today they're celebrating the liberation of the white hostages in the East Congo, and they don't tell about the genocide. And fourth was in Jean Bouffani invited a Congolese Belgian novelist who could actually tell the story from his perspective and take it all the way up to today, because you have to know what's going on in East Congo. is a result of how things were actually installed in 1916 by my country, Belgium. And so he talks about the fact that still today, you know, we have 10 women being raped every minute in the East Congo today. And so he takes it all the way up today. And I'm sorry, indeed, it's like 4 different kaleidoscopic entries to this film, because I didn't want to have talking heads. I didn't want to have talking heads explaining the story. I wanted to have first-hand experiences, people who tell the story from their perspective and juxtapose them. And so, hence, you know, for me, it was more or less, you know, speaking not for, but speaking with, and in solidarity. And so that's how it was constructed. And that was sort of the point of departure. I had just made the film Shadow World, which was very much about the corporatocracy and how actually the corporatocracy, in a sense, through lobby system and the revolving door, has a grab on the government. And that even if you know, you have an election and it's Biden or Trump, it doesn't matter. It's very symptomatic that actually it's a system that's installed through lobbyism, corporatism, and sort of the revolving door that defines very much what politics is today. And that's very similar with the mining industry, that it's Union Minière, which was a private company of our King Leopold II, Union Minière de Katanga, that actually was complicit. It was the mining industry that plotted the assassination, that actually took a hold of the government in Belgium and the king, because the king is actually seating in the Société Générale, the king, the grandnephew of Leopold II. They're still running the Société Générale, which owns Union Minière, but also, you know, William Burton, that just talked about, the ambassador, and the Foster Dulles, all these guys at the top in the United States government were actually having stakes in the Katanga mining industry, in the same Union Minière. That again, it was a corporatocracy that was complicit with the murder and was trying to open up that template through sort of pointing at the mining industry as well. And so this was the setup of the film. But I didn't want to close it off.
Yes, thank you, Johan. Thank you, our audience. We will now have a short 10-minute break, and then we will have the screening.
Okay, thank you.